I just want to start every day, today and every day from now on, 120,000 people are moving to Asia's cities every single day. In 30 years' time, by 2050, this is going to be 2/3 of Asia's population will be in cities, in urban areas. That's 3.3 billion people. The future of Asia and the productivity of Asia is reliant on the cities, which are the engines of growth, and particularly in terms of the efficiency of those cities and how they are livable and how they and their production. To address this challenge, ADB is already engaging on Strategy 2030, and the President has had a number of calls to action. He wants us to be the catalyse finance, be the financier of choice in Asia, and also to catalyse finance in Asia and from outside of Asia. He wants us to have integrated solutions, the best technology, the most appropriate technology, and the best solutions into our projects. He insists that we have a multi-sector approach where possible and where it makes sense, and bring in, not just in say, transport, but link that in with other sectors. And also to operationalise knowledge. You've heard this before. We are very engaged in SDCC about how we can operationalise knowledge from within inside ADB, but also from knowledge partners outside of ADB and into the region, and in between cities within the region. And to do that, we need to engage and promote partnerships. Those partnerships are with other cities, with other countries, inside and outside of the region, with knowledge institutions, educational institutions, and with businesses into our operations. So this is sort of the foundation for where we've come with our Future Cities program over the last 12 to 18 months. What I'm going to talk to you today about is the background to the Future Cities program, where it started, how it started, and how it operates. Give you some examples from our cities, and also the lessons learned, and particularly how those lessons can be applied, not just in the Future Cities program as we move forward, but also in terms of your own projects, hopefully. So the Future Cities program started about 18 months ago, and it's in 6 cities at the moment across Asia. The cities were selected in conjunction with the regional departments, and particularly with mission leaders who saw that they wanted to expand on their current projects in certain cities and saw an ability to broaden that pipeline and broaden the engagement with the cities. Very closely with the sector directors and also with the country directors in each of these countries that we ended up selecting. So the countries, just to go off the top, TBILISI are in Georgia, and off to the east in the other side of ADB's territory is Suva in Fiji. We have ULAANBAATAR in Mongolia, Mandalay in Myanmar, and 2 in Indonesia, Bandung and Makassar. So how is the Future Cities program developed, and what does it do? Cities are already engaged in making themselves more livable. They're trying to achieve being a livable city. This is part of our SDGs. We're helping with that. Obviously, we have projects in many of these cities, in over 500 cities across Asia, but we're also using approaches such as the Green Cities approach and livable cities and competitive cities approaches to build that planning and building that engagement with the cities. But what we understood is we want to try and establish a much longer term engagement with these cities. We wanted to partner with cities directly, not just through national governments. We wanted to partner more directly with cities and see what we could achieve directly with them. And form that partnership not just over a 5-year project cycle, but work with them and engage with them over the next 15 to 20 years. So when you start engaging with a city and you want to build that relationship, where do you start? Imagine it's like a big jigsaw puzzle. If you've got one piece, where do you start in the jigsaw puzzle? It's empty. It could be anywhere. So what we've done is we've selected cities, and we've started with cities where we already have a core project. This has been the critical area for us, where we actually already have the space and the time through this project to begin and enhance that engagement and build that relationship with the city. This has been critical, and in areas where we haven't had a core project, it's a lot more difficult. But what we see with ADB is these core projects, we tend to actually stay in that sector. We have so many of our cities where we've been active for many years, where we might have a water supply project that's been there for 15 years, and that's all we do is water supply and sanitation. Nothing wrong with that. And the same if we have a transport project. 10 years on a MFF for a transport project, but no other aligned projects. What we thought was we'd like to see those projects broaden. We'd like to see road projects actually be linked in with health, with education, so that people are able to use the roads, use the transport to get to the education institutions so they can learn more, so they can access health services. So this is part of broadening that pipeline in the city and part of what the President has called to action. So part of the Future Cities program is not just enhancing the current project that is there, but making it more effective and then starting to build the relationship with the city, looking at additional projects that will come into the pipeline further down and broadening that pipeline so we have a much more resilient program in that city. The way we do that in the first instance is trying to bring the 180B approach into the picture. And so utilising technical assistance and knowledge from within inside the bank, not just from SDCC, but the work that's being done by all of you across the bank. It might be in gender, it might be in transport, it might be in smart systems, ICT, education and health. And where it makes sense, taking the resources, the technical assistance, the knowledge, the individuals who have the expertise in those areas and applying it around the current projects that's in that city. And where possible, enhancing that project so that the city sees much more benefit from it. In addition to that, we're taking on the President's call for finance plus knowledge plus leveraging finance. In the knowledge, we're bringing in our knowledge partners. For instance, we have Austrian Institute of Technology, we have Monash in Australia and other institutes and other educational institutes like ETH Zurich, who are coming into the cities and actually working very closely with the cities and helping to develop their pipeline, but more so enhancing their capacity and capability to develop their cities. We have city-to-city twinning that's coming out of that. And we also have business-to-city twinning that we're facilitating and is already taking off, not just from our own efforts, but is actually becoming self-supporting. Those knowledge partners have also been, in the last 12 months, integral in actually attracting additional finance. So it comes in terms of leveraging additional finance. We have $20 million coming in from through one financing institute, one knowledge partner, coming into 2 or 3 of our projects. So that's not bad, where we've actually only invested about $500,000 into that partnership. They're bringing in another $20 million. We have linkages with the knowledge partners with their national governments, such as Austria and France and Australia, who are also bringing in money and resources and capacity into these cities. So the knowledge is also producing a leverage into the finance. We're also aligning very closely with other IFIs and with other country donors into these cities, such as Austria coming into TBILISI, and I'll talk about that a little bit more shortly. The aim is that not just to enhance the project that's there already, but it's to start to build a pipeline of a project that's a little broader than what we've done traditionally in that city. And then over time, expand out. Like I said, a road project becomes a roads and maybe education project, maybe into health sector comes into there, into the city. So then our infrastructure is much more effective and has much higher results. That's the aim of the Future Cities program. So in the last 12 to 18 months, we've managed to develop and coordinate more than 9 other regional TAs, about $10 million across those 6 cities. And again, they're not applied universally across all the cities, it's only where it makes sense and where it's useful to enhance the current project or the future pipeline. We've attracted at least $30 million worth of grants. We expect that to rise significantly over the next couple of months. And we're preparing concept papers and pre-feasibility studies with our partners for more than $1 billion worth of projects. Some of these projects will actually be included in pipeline in the business plans over the next 1 or 2 years, but the majority of them will be based in future pipeline that's to be developed not just by ADB, but by other financiers in the cities, where we don't expect that all these projects will be financed by ADB, but also by other partners. So just to recap in terms of our approach, it's fundamentally about strengthening the relationships with the city. It's about that long-term trust, that long-term partnership with the city. They trust us. They see us as an honest broker, developing projects with them, helping them with knowledge, helping them with establishing other partnerships with other donors, with other cities, with other businesses. It's about building on the jigsaw puzzle. I see cities as a massive jigsaw of interacting activities, and rather than just being a single sector approach, is actually developing additional projects that build on the synergies, whether it be institutional synergies or actual physical synergies within the city, and building that jigsaw. And finally, broadening our pipeline so that it's much more effective, much more resilient, and has a much higher impact. I'll give you some examples from across our cities. TBILISI in Georgia, we've been there for over a year now, and there's a sustainable urban transport improvement project in Georgia, in TBILISI. And that's been there for 10 years. Fourth tranche is almost finished. Fifth tranche is being prepared at the moment. And so we've actually, with Cities Development Initiative for Asia, we've brought them into there, and they're preparing bus rapid transit pre-feasibility as well as a metro rehabilitation pre-feasibility studies. These studies may be taken up by Central West and be brought into the fifth tranche of the loan, or maybe even under additional financing. They may also be picked up by some of our partners, some of the other governments that are working inside TBILISI. I know European Investment Bank is also interested, EBRD. We don't see that as of course it'd be important if we can get ADB to finance these, but we see this as part of the relationship building with the city. Another key element in the city is the project coordinator, or the national planning coordinator, we call them. These are individuals that we've recruited as consultants. They've worked with the city. They come and learn about ADB. They learn about our knowledge that we can provide, the resources we can provide. They work inside the RM, and then they're placed inside the city, very close to the mayor, sometimes in the economic development department. And they become the focus of knowledge, focus of information between the city and ADB. This individual is becoming very critical in how we engage with the city, not just the Future Cities program, but also other missions that are coming into and out of the city. And you ask anyone that's been working in these cities that we've had, whether they're allied with our program or not, the national coordinator has been really, really effective in the success of their missions, and the cities are seeing that they're very effective in getting their messages to us across all of our sectors. So that urban coordinator is very crucial. The knowledge partners I've talked about a lot. In TBILISI we have the Austrian Institute of Technology and their big data and transport mobility section are working about how we can strengthen the linkages between the bus, the rail and pedestrian traffic inside the city, and actually really utilise that big data from mobile phones and from other applications and use that in physical planning and overall strategic planning in the city. So this is going to lay the foundation and the groundwork for future projects that are already being planned by Central West to take place in TBILISI. And we see a lot of this as groundwork for that. AIT has also been instrumental in facilitating city-to-city twinning with Vienna and TBILISI, and so we're seeing an exchange of a technical exchange between the cities. They're also establishing an education program up in TBILISI, and we see that TBILISI may end up actually being a sustainable urban transport hub for whole of Central West based on some of those interactions. Moving on to one of the other cities, all of these types of activities are happening in all of our cities. So there's at least 8 to 10 different transactions and activities happening in each one of the 6 cities. In Suva in Fiji, we have a recently approved sanitation program that is going ahead. Big pipes going into all the urban areas in Suva, which are 4 cities. We're providing capacity building into the customary land department within Suva so that we can actually start helping them to prepare some of these less formal settlements to accept and be ready to accept this big pipe water supply and sanitation. At the same time, we have CRC for water-sensitive cities at a Monash in Australia in Suva, and they've brought in $15 or almost $20 million from a grant from Wellcome Trust in the UK, the first time that's been awarded outside of the United Kingdom, that grant, and also from utilities in Australia and from other grants from education institutions, where we're going to be piloting decentralised water, sanitation, drainage and flood control practices in informal settlements around Suva. That's also going to be done in Makassar in Indonesia, one of our other cities, and we expect that this pilot will provide ways for us to address informal settlements, not just in the water and sanitation sector, but also how we address land acquisition, how we address architecture, microfinance, microenterprise, and also how women integrate across that whole area, not just in the Pacific, but across Southeast Asia. One of our key technical assistances in Suva, as well as in TBILISI and our other cities, is the Future Women, Future Cities program. And this is a core element across all of our projects. And we're very grateful for that project and how that's going to enhance the role of women entrepreneurs in Suva, and also in our work in TBILISI and also in Bandung as well. We have Smart Systems project, which is rolling out across 5 of our 6 cities. This is going to identify 5 projects in each city which can be financed either through ADB or most likely through PPP or through other financiers, where it looks at high technology solutions, whether it be in smart water supply, in traffic management systems. In the case of Suva, it's probably going to be in terms of women's entrepreneurship and leadership, and how that can link in and strengthen productivity in the city. And we'll be taking those on to pre-feasibility studies during this year. In ULAANBAATAR, not sure how many minutes we've got left. In ULAANBAATAR, we already have, there's 2 projects there, transport and housing. And we're not going to try to change those 2 projects, but what we're trying to do is build the relationship between those 2. They're in different parts of the city, there's not a huge amount of overlap. So the institutions in the city government, we're trying to strengthen. We're trying to strengthen the physical planning that's there so that they are much more aligned, and the institutions themselves don't work well together in the city. So we have the IAU, which is the Paris Planning Agency, coming in as our knowledge partner there and working very closely with the city about how they can enhance their institution and change it over the next couple of years to be much more effective and coordinated. There's a lot of capacity building and physical planning going on up there, and we've also had the low carbon and climate resilient TA from SDCC in there, so that the city is more able to plan climate resilient infrastructure in the future. And once we're able to start lending again to UB and actually start to build those projects, we expect that the city will already be ready to take that on. We've also enhanced the city's ability to undertake PPP projects, where we've been training them in the International Infrastructure Support System, which was developed by ADB a number of years ago and adopted by all the IFIs. We've translated them into Mongolian, and they are starting to use it already to prepare projects up to financing stage for PPP. It can also be used for sovereign projects as well. I won't take much longer, but in Bandung, Makassar and Mandalay, we have a number of these activities with our knowledge partners, with TA, and bringing in additional finance. Just some others, we have about $500,000 worth of scholarships that we've managed to secure for key planners, key engineers out of these cities to go and get master's degrees to get additional training capacity building. And we've also brought a lot of training capacity building back. So the lessons we've learned from this, and some of the things that can be adopted by all of you in some of the work you do, whether you're with our Future Cities program or just in your own working in cities, is we've really found that to be able to focus resources is important. I've just come back from one country where we've got one project one TA is in 5 cities, another TA is in 4 other cities. We have a loan project across 4 other cities, not the same cities. And what we've seen is where we can actually bring in, say, a gender project, we can bring in a financing project, we can bring in low carbon, climate resilient project, and a smart systems project. And we bring in the marginal parts of those TAs into a city together, and they work as a cluster. We have a much greater impact. The same with the loan projects. Second is to build the jigsaw. Instead of having projects that are in a city completely separate, a road project over here, water supply project over here, is start to look at where institutionally or physically they can overlap, where they can build synergies between each other. It seems simple and seems obvious, but it's not always the case. We're structurally not set up that way in ADB. And what I see is these projects regularly in cities that are not overlapping. There's no synergy between them. And that's not a waste of resources, but it means that it's not as effective and as efficient use of resources than it could be. Third is focusing on facilitation and function. The facilitation aspect of this is huge. Inside the cities, that national coordinator is crucial. And if you're really serious about building capacity and building relationships in a city, that facilitative activity is crucial. They are just indispensable. But also the facilitation back in ADB. All of us work back here. We don't know what's happening in our other division, in our own RD. We don't, in SDCC, we're not always aware of the knowledge and the resources that are available, even with the next person down the hallway. So the facilitation of resources, facilitation of knowledge inside ADB is also critical. And in fact, it's actually been the most difficult thing to achieve over the last 12 months. It's where and I see people smiling because I know I've been harassing people over the last 12 months to actually try and see that working together on this actually has great benefit. And it's starting to turn now. Aligning people's functions so that they're actually working at least in the same direction in these cities is clear. So structurally, we're not always aligned. We can't change structures, but if we change people's functions so they're at least thinking the same way, those structures will follow. Maybe in 5 years, maybe ADB, maybe 10 years, but those structures will eventually change if we start working in an aligned area. And I think the fourth point, and probably the most crucial, is in terms of that we take a wider perspective. The thing that the cities keep talking to us about is that we're seen as an honest broker. We're not there flogging our next project. We're not there just out for loans and developing our loan pipelines. Some of the other IFIs are known for that. In fact, they steal projects from us. What we're seeing is there that we've got the interest of the city. We're there for the long term. We're there to help them develop their city to be more livable. And this honest broker, this wider perspective, is giving us a lot of kudos. It means that we're actually achieving what the President wants, that we're actually the financier of choice in these cities. And I think that's something to be very proud of. So finally, in this, it doesn't have to start in the traditional urban sector, water supply, sanitation, or in the roads in these cities. I see that this can start in health, it can start in education, it can start in the finance sector. It's critical that it starts around a core project and you build the jigsaw from that core project in a confined city space. I think that's the lessons we've learned over the last 12 to 18 months. So really, we've got an approach to future cities that we think will enhance what we're already doing. We're always going to be lending, we're always going to be looking at dispersing. But we see that this program and this approach is going to enhance what we do there so that the impact is greater and so that the livability of cities is increased and that they really truly do become the engines of growth for Asia. And I see that all of us can play a part in that. And we really love to have your feedback and your involvement, and we're certainly very happy to coordinate and work with you if you've got any questions as we move forward. Thank you very much.